Hey, what's going on, guys? Boki here. Now, I have been a little skeptical of the rise of popularity of esports, and when I say that, I'm mostly referring to the NA scene. And while I understand the appeal of playing games competitively, I used to play FPS games competitively, what always surprised me is the depth of interest in it. Not only can players stand to win millions of dollars, but an entire industry of organizers, commentators, broadcasters has grown up around it. Back when young Boki was in middle school, I remember the height of competitive Halo when it was run through the MLG circuit. For the NA competitive gaming scene as a whole, this was huge. It was on ESPN, right? It was the first time I really thought that competitive gaming could be a true avenue for a young pup like me to earn some decent money.
You're telling me I can play my favorite game 8 hours a day, grind through the ladders, and make it out of my bedroom to the main stage? Count me in, man.
I couldn't wait to tell my parents, you know what, Mom and Dad? It wasn't all for nothing. Look at me gaming on ESPN.
Welcome to the MLG ESPN Top 10. I'm Chris Puckett, and we're getting this one started at number 10 with Jeremy. The bank shot off the wall with the sniper, connecting with 3 perfect headshots. That's a way to start a game.
The main stage, the lights, the high-def webcams, the commentators that would share their knowledge and hype up the audience, and the best of the best going at it on my favorite game. As a viewer, you would follow all the top-tier players, right? Walshy, Ogre 1, Ogre 2, the other guy on Final Boss. Trash talk would be back and forth as spit was spraying all over their CRT monitors.
Hey, weren't you guys supposed to 3-0 us? Look at me. T2, look at me, please. T2, Tom, look at me. Don't look around, look at me.
And straight rippin' won the series 3 games to 1.
Gandhi, look at me. Gandhi, you suck.
But to me, as I got older and out of the competitive scene, this always seemed unsustainable. I figured that, eventually people would get bored of watching other people play games, grow out of it, and the industry would shrivel up in a way. I might just be getting older, but I just can't see esports fans being as ubiquitous as the fans of any other sport. And I also can't see, just down the road, your average middle-aged Joes getting together to watch esports championships and having a good time. Esports are popular among millions of gamers, but they cannot attract the millions or even billions that sports can attract. In this video, I wanted to talk about esports and why the industry, at least in North America, has been on a decline and will more than likely stay as a niche industry, despite seeing great success at times over the last 15 years or so. First of all, video games have been that extra barrier of interaction that further removes you from the experience, right? If I'm watching the player, the person whose skill I'm admiring, I'm basically just watching a guy sitting in front of a computer, clicking a mouse or twiddling his thumbs on a controller. Again, not to take away from their talent or hard work that brought them to that high level of play, but if I'm watching the game, I'm just watching a bunch of avatars doing stuff, without seeing the skill involved and making them do that stuff. One could argue that both of these are really boring for the average person, even though that person may enjoy casually playing video games and even sometimes enjoy watching friends play games. I think most people are like this, right? Especially since most people don't play video games very much, and most of those who do play casually aren't really interested in them to the point that they're going to get a lot out of them watching them as spectators. Of course, there's always going to be a niche market for esports, but I think its growth is going to plateau at some point, if not already. Oh yeah, and in video games, the game itself limits what a player is able to do, right? Like you can only jump so high in a shooter, or your buildings in a real-time strategy game can only be built at a certain speed. Obviously, a player's skill comes from understanding these limits and adjusting your play style or strategy around them, but it does make it less interesting to watch. In actual sports, inside the rules of the game, players are only limited by their own bodies, and the fact that teams can't usually win a match just by going through the same motions without much variation leads to a much higher level of variance in how a match is played, or how a match plays out, and therefore it creates more excitement as a viewer.
Oh yeah, that's why I watch sports.
For esports, it's extremely hard to follow what's going on if you don't play video games or that specific game. When you watch football or basketball, yeah, the casual fan doesn't understand the intricacies or the play calling, but they can at least understand the goal is to make a basket or get the ball in the end zone, right? Take soccer as an example.
Also called football to the rest of the world, because that makes sense.
You've never watched this sport in your life, right? You literally have no idea what is what.
I'm so confused.
What are they doing, you ask? Someone answers, well, it's X team versus Y team. The purpose is to have possession of the ball and kick it over the line of the opponent's goal into the net. To begin watching the sport, that's basically all you need. Then whenever something happens like an offside kick, a free kick, throw in, and so on, it can be explained on a case-by-case basis, and that builds your knowledge. But to do this in a game like Overwatch, or Dota, or League of Legends, to someone who has never played the game is exceptionally difficult. I played many games myself, but to fully understand a game like Overwatch is a process that takes time. For this to happen, the person in question should probably watch a good streamer for some weeks, so that they can actually see their point of view, instead of watching a match where you see everything almost all at once. Then, in watching that particular streamer or really good player, they'll hopefully learn little by little. On top of that, it's helpful if they also play the game themselves at the same time, right? And then, they should be better equipped to watch matches. But even then, there may be moments where they'll be wondering what on earth is going on. Even people who've been playing the game seriously honestly for years have had trouble figuring out what's going on in pro matches. The uninformed person wants quick and easy entertainment. The hurdle to understanding a game like Overwatch is simply too much for most of them. It requires way too much prior knowledge and background information. You would have to somehow make a game that is both appealing to hardcore gamers and non-gamers. And the first game I can think of right away is Rocket League. Rocket League, for those that don't know, is basically just car soccer, right? It's probably the closest thing to being easily understood and watchable while still being appealing to play for casual and hardcore gamers. And even that still has issues, because even as a fan of the RLCS, part of Rocket League's problem is that the pros have just gotten too good at this game. Their aerial game just keeps getting better and better. The players just keep getting faster and faster. And while their skills are admirable, it still makes the game incredibly chaotic to spectate. Another example is Counter-Strike, right? You could argue that. Counter-Strike has been the same format since the beginning, and it's pretty understandable from a non-player perspective. Terrorists want to plant the bomb. Counter-terrorists want to stop them. They stop the terrorists by shooting them in the head. Terrorists plant the bomb and also shoot the CTs in the head. That's really all you need to start watching the game. Yeah, there's some esoteric stuff in Counter-Strike. You know, the pistol round is kind of confusing. One-way smokes are confusing. The economy can be kind of weird, but it can all be explained slowly while the core gameplay still makes perfect sense to anyone. Fans of this esport have actually said that they've seen cops and security at events who clearly aren't really into gaming watching it and understand what's happening. So esports needs more games like this, right? But the issue is advertisement dollars and audiences. Gaming is pop culture these days, and advertisers want to be a part of it. Esports investment makes sense if people assume that gamers and esports fans are 1-to-1, but they're not. I would argue they're not even 1,000-to-1. Organizations don't do the best job of demonstrating the three things advertisers care about. The first thing is reach. How big the audience and how relevant is that audience to the advertiser? This includes actually explaining the demographics of the audience. The second thing is ease of use. More dollars will flow if you support standard advertisement formats. This is something that esports has been historically bad at. The third thing is brand safety, right? If you're a brand advertiser and you have a lot of money to spend, you don't want your advertisement for your beverage next to gore, political, or sexual content, or anything remotely controversial. And in a game like Counter-Strike, where the whole goal is to kill terrorists and plant bombs and kill counter-terrorists, it just doesn't look good for brands. Nowadays, right, fast forward to 2023, we are seeing very clearly that more money has definitely been lost than made. And what it boils down to is that the games aren't accessible enough. It doesn't matter how much money you spend on marketing or how pretty your graphics are. You need people to be able to sit down and understand what's going on. The reason why esports are so big in China, Korea, and other Eastern Asian or Southeast Asian countries is because of gaming cafes. Kids grow up in them. Everyone knows about them, so everyone knows the games. The culture in the United States is totally different. Now, gaming is no longer a niche thing, basically over the last 10 years, but esports absolutely is very niche. First-person perspective games and games filled with particle effects are very difficult to spectate. It's even difficult if you're a player of a game like Overwatch to watch a match and understand what's going on. The game needs to be accessible to viewers, not just that they know what the game is, but they have to actually tell what's going on in the game. And be honest, beyond keeping your eyes on the kill feed, how often can you actually tell what each player is doing during an Overwatch League match? Also, and sorry to get controversial as I'm about to hate on an entire generation, but investors are largely moron boomers who just see big dollar signs and don't know anything about anything.
It would be against the law for you to climb that wall and to cut these plants.
I'm gonna cut it down and have to blow up the goddamn place! Sorry, I'm looking to buy a house in this awful market right now, so don't even get me going on boomers.
Obviously, there are exceptions, but most of them can't tell the difference between a game like GTA and League of Legends. So they'll invest tons of money into a Fortnite or Apex or Rainbow Six tournament after getting sold on viewership numbers from Counter-Strike or League of Legends or Dota. Then, when they obviously don't get the return that they hoped for because those games are on two wildly different levels, they write off esports as a whole. Another problem for many people with esports has always been,
Why the f am I supposed to care about any of these teams?
I support my local sports teams because they're from where I'm from. I go to the local games, get to drinking a little bit, get into shouting matches with fans from the opposite team. It all feels organic and rooted in human beings and people and the places we're from. But esports teams? I feel absolutely no reason to truly care about any of them. It all feels extremely corporate, vapid, soulless. The only interesting aspect as a player is watching extremely high quality players in order to learn something from them to put into practice into my own play. But that has little to do with any of the teams and is solely based on who the best players are at any given time. The thing that's being followed most of the time is just purely the skill, not the teams really, and not the players. And if it is one sole player that the audience is following, like Optic Nadeshot back in the Call of Duty days, then bandwagoners will only tune in to see that specific team that the popular player is on. And from there, again, no one will care about the other teams. Like from 2011 to 2015, Nadeshot was Call of Duty Esports. And if you were a viewer, you were only tuning into Optic because Nadeshot was on Optic, and you wanted to see whether or not him and his buddies would win again. Overall, organizations organization owners are operating teams at a loss while paying huge salaries to esports players. Evil geniuses, they parted ways with many of their expensive League of Legends players. 100 Thieves had to lay off employees and senior executives. The stock price of FaZe Clan has plunged down to just 50 cents a share. They had to lay off at least 40% of their employees. Cloud9 pulled out nearly half the esports leagues that they participated in. TSM sold its slot in the League Championship Series. That's just a few examples. And when you see things like that, you have no reason to invest in esports. For a brief minute, all these organizations I just mentioned, and esports in general, had a massive boom during COVID lockdowns because it was thrusted into the limelight due to the lack of traditional sports or motorsports, and people obviously had more time to game in general. And this resulted in higher interest across the board. But it goes a little deeper than that because esports has always been sort of a failed business as no one has ever built a proper way to make money in it. Have you ever asked yourself what's the biggest competition to esports right now, and has been for the last few years? It's pretty obvious, and certain games have lost some big name players to it. And that's streamers. Individual streamers, I mean. And even teams and organizations make way more money from semi-popular streams than they ever could from esports, because you get a good cut of revenue from stuff like advertisements, super chats, subscriptions, donations, right? By contrast, esports really don't make you any money given that the revenue and exposure goes to the tournament organizer. This gets amplified by how most players demand a salary that provides zero return to the team and organization, with only a cut of the prize pool, which is often a percentage of basically nothing. So here we are in 2023. Venture money that has helped fuel most esports organizations has died down, partly because of the recession and partly because more people have wised up to the fact that esports and teams and organizations provide zero return on investment. There's a very clear and far more profitable competition in the market, particularly in the form of individual streamers, where you can simply invest in a smaller set of personalities while gaining 1, brand recognition, 2, airtime because their livelihood directly correlates to giving you brand visibility, 3, guaranteed return on investment because the exposure goes to them and you instead of the tournament organizer, and then 4, feeds a healthier ecosystem because most streamers don't just operate alone.
So overall,
just to sum it up, here's why esports will stay a niche interest, however big that niche is, at least until the older generations die off. Number 1, the public can't be convinced that esports are sports. If esports was just called competitive gaming, there would be no comparison to actual sports. But since sports is in the word esports, the average person may be compelled to compare the two. And unfortunately, with gaming perceived as a lazy pastime with very little physical activity being involved, the average person is likely to conclude that esports are not sports and be discouraged from watching them. The second thing is that video games are proprietary and quickly changing. Normal sports are not owned by one company. Video games are. While a sport can be played without the approval of some association or league, one company controls the sale and gameplay of a specific game. This makes it less attractive on a lower, non-professional level. Also, most sports have barely changed in the past century. Video games, on the other hand, are almost always changing. Call of Duty comes out with a new game every year that can have entirely different mechanics. Or you can have a game like League of Legends, but they are constantly changing the meta with new characters. Or a game like Counter-Strike, where the engine needs to be updated to kind of get with the times, and that can change how the game is played. Unless some standard games with few updates can be popularized in esports, it'll be tough to grow as an industry that requires the viewers to understand new games so frequently. And this brings me to my next point. Video games are too complex and foreign to the average person. On one hand, it's easy to figure out a new sport once you're familiar with a few. For example, I've never watched rugby before, but I watched rugby during the last Olympics, and pretty quickly I was able to understand it and be able to enjoy it. Watching esports video games is difficult for the average person, not to mention their reluctance to watch it in the first place. Everything about it just sounds weird too, right? Players use funny usernames and team names to identify themselves, and there's just a lot of jargon involved. The fourth thing is that esports cannot inspire local pride. Like I said before, a good sports team, or even a bad team, has the ability to unite a city or region. Even people who aren't into the sport will proudly wear their team's colors, and that team's logo will appear all over, outside of houses, businesses, and even sponsored products. It's assumed that everyone is following the team. I mean, could a city really get behind an esports team or a player? As of right now, esports fandoms only really seem to arise online. Even if a team's players were drawn from one region, where is the opportunity for sponsorships and local pride? And the last point is that playing esports requires technology. Esports are far more resource intensive than real sports because you need a computer or gaming console to play. Outside of first world countries, it's far easier to get a ball to play a game than a high-end computer with good internet. This point isn't as big as the other ones, but until this can get solved, esports really don't have much chance of going global. But yeah, guys, that's all I got. Like and subscribe if you like content like this. And what do you feel about esports? Is it on the rise? Is it on the decline? Does it even matter? Should they be compared to regular sports, or is it okay as just a niche market? Does it need to get bigger necessarily than what it is? Let me know what you think. And yeah, guys, we will see you in the next one. Later.
Hey, this is your boy Boki. Can't make it to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you. Peace.
Hey, Boki. You know this was a really good YouTube video. You're bringing me back to the good old days when all I thought about was pizza rolls, chicken tendies, Mountain Dew, and grinding with the boys online in hopes of being a pro gamer. We would be up all night, owning noobs, and definitely not yelling derogatory and harmful remarks at them when we would win. If we were recorded and put online in today's world, we would be canceled. We just wanted to make that pro gaming dough. Ah, the good times. Well, now I'm a custodian at the local elementary school. Keep up the great work, Boki. And to everyone else listening, subscribe to Boki, or I will set thumbtacks outside of your bedroom door tonight.